Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to TechGig webinar series, our endeavor to empower techies. We believe that sharing of knowledge is the key to enhance our skills and grow us as professionals. With this principle in mind, we've initiated a series of webinars conducted by industry experts to give you all a crisp insight of various domains. The topic of today's session is Web APIs and API Management. All you need to know about it, what it is, and what it can do for your organization. Our guest speaker today is Dinesh Shetty, Senior Certified IT Specialist, IBM Software Services Software Group. Dinesh Shetty has more than 13 years of experience leading SOA and integration architecture projects, IT consulting, and application development, supporting telecommunications, insurance, health, financial, and airline industries. He leads IBM's software services team for IBM API management solutions. He has experience in deploying long-established technologies, Unix, distributed network, and messaging middleware environments. His expertise using leading enterprise service bus technologies like WebSphere Data Power, WebSphere Message Broker, and WebSphere MQ, along with design methodologies like IBM's GS method to effect and accelerate application integration, makes him a highly sought-after resource. His application integration skills and his deep expertise in all the data power and ESB offerings of IBM has enabled him to prepare and deliver comprehensive technical presentations, more than a dozen conferences, and is currently co-authoring an article on deployment process patterns in SOA appliances. His past experiences include writing parser programs in C and test experience in IBM Software Labs, make him a well-rounded professional with both product development and IT consulting. So without further delay, I introduce you all to our guest speaker. Over to you, Dinesh.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone, or morning or evening from wherever you've joined. My name is Dinesh Shetty, and as Garima introduced me, I'm a Senior Certified IT Specialist, work at the IBM Software Group in the Software Services Organization. So today we're going to be talking about Web APIs. We're also going to be touching upon API management and everything that you would want to need to know about what it is and how it fits into the bigger picture in an enterprise, and lots of other interesting stuff. I'm also going to be showing you some APIs that are there out on the web, and if you have time, I'll also give you a short demo on one of those. All right? So to begin with, I have an agenda with me. What I want to do is I want to introduce the API economy. Right? Everybody knows API stands for Application Programming Interface. That has always been the traditional acronym. But today we're going to be talking about Web APIs and how the connotation or the interpretation of an API has changed over the years. So we're going to be talking about the API economy. We're going to be looking at what are the top APIs today. I want to run you through some of the examples that are very popular, some industry examples, and then we get into the meat of the topic where I actually introduce you the technical terminologies, the roles and the relationships that are there in this ecosystem, right? So I'll run you through REST, an overview of XML and JSON, and I'll talk to you about API management in an enterprise architectural view, right? I'll also give you some information on how do you secure APIs, because this is a very, very important topic. So we'll go through this as an agenda. Okay. So what does the API economy look like? What are we talking about when we talk about web APIs and the economy as such, right? Now that really boils down to understanding how we've been doing business these days, right? If you see 10 or 15 years ago, websites were the thing that kind of gave the modernization aspect to an organization. And if an organization didn't have a website, then it would be looked down upon. It was not really cool not to have a website, right? But over the years, it has changed. From the millions that used to go to websites for information, organizational websites, generic websites, that's no longer the situation, right? We're now talking about trillions. And when I say trillions, I know there's no trillions of people are not there on this world. I'm not talking about trillions of consumers, but I'm talking about trillions of endpoints, right? Like, for example, a person, you have a smartphone, he probably also has a tablet, he has his own website. If some cars in the West are connected cars, internet TVs are very commonplace. So if you see one individual has multiple endpoints that actually go to organizations in terms of fetching information, presenting you information wherever you are, right? So that's where we're looking at. We're looking at consumption in the trillions, right? The way we're going after our customers is really changed, and that basically brings in the amount of traffic that you will see from these connected endpoints. And when I say endpoints, I really mean endpoints. It could be, as you can see on the right hand side of the picture, it could be connected cars, it could be trading banks, partner banks that connect to your organization, internet TVs, and what have you, right? So that is just to give a brief on how we are reaching out to customers today. In terms of the business, when we look at this as a business, what kind of business can APIs or web APIs, bring about? And there's really, the best way to explain this is by giving you the examples of eBay and Amazon. Just look at the amount of items that eBay can sell just by APIs, right? 7 billion worth of items on eBay are sold via the APIs. eBay has their API, makes it very easy for app developers to create APIs using their API and then transact with eBay, right? And as you can see, it really grows in terms of revenue. It has really grown. Similar thing has happened with Amazon, right? If you look at the kind of growth and network activity that Amazon has seen, has really saved a lot of money just by putting out APIs, right? So what we're talking about is reducing overhead while you actually continue to grow in terms of revenue, right? And I'll quickly touch upon why I'm saying that you have lower overheads. Okay. Moving on. What are the business benefits? What do you think would be the challenges to bring up an API platform for your organization? Expose and bring one public persona, right? If you look at it, what we're looking at is the ability to reach new markets, right? Of course, increased customer usage, increased base of customers, enhancing of your branding. If you are available, if applications can connect to your business via your APIs, you are providing that that branding, and certainly it's a case of modernization when it comes to picking up APIs today, right? You also have a competitive advantage in terms of being able to reach out to customers, reach out to application developers against an organization which has not really invested in this API infrastructure and API economy, right? The best part of exposing APIs is increase in innovation, and I have an example that I want to show you through an example from Philips when they came out with the reason why they came out with an API I'll shortly visit that slide as well. Increasing scale, you're not really limited. If you have a web API, if your organization has an API that exposes, the business to application developers, you're not really bound to the development team, to the app development team that you have on board in your organization, right? You have your API. There's millions and millions of developers outside in the world who would probably want to use your APIs, create innovative applications, and go in that way. So if you see, if you read the pictures from bottom to the top, APIs are basically going to be the front end of your organization. App developers who are going to consume these APIs are going to create applications that are going to be probably downloaded by millions of customers, used in applications which would be either connected cars. The most common one is the smartphone, and tablets and internet TVs and what have you, right? So if you see, you're actually really increasing the application developer platform and the number of people on that particular platform, right? Now all said and done, we've seen some of the organizations that have really benefited from this, but these come with some challenges that need to be embraced. And as an organization, as an enterprise architect or a business person, you certainly need to know what kind of strategy you'll have to put in place to actually put this together. First one comes from the infrastructure. You need to focus on, of course, scaling your platform to serve to probably millions of connected clients, connected devices or endpoints. Who's going to create these APIs for you? It's probably going to be a subset or a superset of your backend assets. You probably have services that are being used internally and that you want to expose, right? And when you want to expose any kind of information, the first thing the first organization that comes knocking on your door is security. So you need to really look at how are you going to secure your APIs and things like that. So in that area. And in terms of operational control, well, this is going to be a business. You're certainly going to be interested in who's actually using your APIs. How are you going to make business sense? Why are you using it? You probably want to look at some analytics and find out how many orders of yellow sweaters you had that came from a certain geo or a certain type of an endpoint. It could be you want to probably check whether the orders came from a tablet PC. It could be from an internet TV. Where did you get that? So it gives a lot of business insight when you invest in the API infrastructure for your organization, and then based on these you can derive business decisions, come out with business decisions, right? So these are the things that you need to worry about. How are you going to publish? Once you have your APIs ready, how are you going to publish these APIs? How are people going to know about your API, right? So these are the things that you need to worry about. Now, I've been talking about APIs, and as enterprise architects and IT managers and business people, you certainly need to know how you're going to classify APIs. What different kinds of APIs are there, right? And mind you, I am going to take you through a very technical set of terminologies that explain what APIs are. So just bear with me until you understand the classification and stuff like that, right? So in terms of the classification, right? Customers are going to be customers of API management platforms, and I talk about web APIs and API management platforms interchangeably because one is related to the other. So if you look at the different kinds of API types, right? You probably would start as an organization. You probably want to open up an API and want to consume it only internally. You could be a very large organization that has many applications and application development teams sitting and working for for different lines of business. And you probably own a part of the infrastructure that hosts these services, the core business services. If you're a bank, it probably is the core banking application. If you're an insurance agent, if you're an insurance organization, it's probably the core applications from that domain, right? So to begin with, you probably have private and internal APIs. These are going to be exposed only to developers from the enterprise, right? These are usually targeted, to be consumed by application development teams that know about the API and probably building some cool applications for the enterprise. And this is, this is the business driver here is really to increase the productivity of employees. I know I worked with an organization that built a HR management application, a mobile application that would help their thousands and thousands of employees to actually look up projects that are available and projects they could apply to, right? So there's very very wide set of uses and creative applications that you could create using APIs, right? The next is when you want to move or kind of mature into exposing your APIs to a limited set of external parties, right? Let's say you're a bank. You probably want to expose some APIs that will enable and reduce paperwork for transactions, right? This could be open to business partners. As I said, in the banking domain, it could be a trading bank, it could be a corporate bank versus a main bank and things like that, right? Now, this is basically a very common use case. It's been prevalent from quite some time now, which takes us to the last one, which is the public or rather open APIs. This is going to be open to all, right? This is like Facebook API, or it could be Google Google Maps API, right? And the developers in this case could be anybody on the street. It could be someone, an enthusiastic tech geek who would probably want to quickly write up an app that gives you some geotagging that kind of gives you the location and things like that. So you can get really creative. And there's a certain set of application developers that I'm talking about. These are not really people who want to get bogged down with piles and piles of documentation on how to use APIs. They just want to get going, right? They just want to quickly see a request, a response, and be done with it. Quickly create that app that they want to push out to their consumers, right? So these are the three ways in which one can classify the different types of APIs, right? All right. So I've been talking about exposing back-end assets or enterprise assets to the outside world, right? And this is the biggest question that people ask me. How is it different from traditional SOA that people have been doing? Is web services is not new. It has been there for years and years together. There's been so much standardization that has happened. So there is a question that you will face if you are promoting APIs and web APIs, right? But it is different, right? And the beauty lies in understanding where you want to go, who your consumers are. Now, if you look at this chart, right, I've kind of made some points that kind of tell you where you can see SOA services, and when I say SOA services, I really mean web services. If you look at it, the SOA services are traditionally been for internal consumption, right? Probably some partners, but it is mostly for internal consumption, right? Whereas web APIs are targeted to more, app developer-centric usage, right? So the consumers are internal, and it could be also external, right? Most of the times it can be external, right? Web APIs embrace the open community, right? Social where social business is critical, right? That's something that you don't really see when you look at SOA web services or SOA services, right? The promote of reuse within the company becomes important when you look at SOA web services, right? Technically, SOA services are based on the SOAP protocol, right? And of course, it's really not necessary. You can have service-oriented architecture without HTTP. You could have many other ways in which you could do that, but mostly you will find SOAP and protocol-independent headers being used for web services, whereas web APIs are more RESTful, right? They leverage the HTTP scaling that you get with HTTP and things like that, right? Ease of use ease of use and simplicity and readability are important for web APIs, right? Ease of use. I just gave you an example. A tech geek who wants to develop an app all on his own without having IT managers and lead architects, give directions, he probably wants to quickly write an app. It's going to be his own app, right? For that, he really doesn't want to spend read piles and piles of documentation, look up XSDs and things like that, right? Whereas in terms of SOA web services, it is more to achieve interoperability based on very well structured visuals. These visuals can then contain XSDs, import XSDs, and things like that. Web services are more coarse-grained, whereas web APIs can be fine-grained. The amount of data that you want apps to look at is really not in the MBs, right? If you're looking at a smartphone app, you're really not going to return or request for a payload from a backend which is going to be in MBs. It's going to eat away a lot of your data. So preferably smaller amounts of data is what you're looking at when you're looking at web APIs. Not really very strict in terms of XSDs and other things. The consistency is relaxed. You have a little more freedom than the traditional source services as such. So these are some of the important points that one can talk about when you look at what's the difference between web services and web APIs. Okay, and it's important. It's really important if you're going to be an API developer or an API management promoter. It's important to know these things. All right, let's look at the top APIs today. I want to quickly run you through some of the industry examples, and I think I have the time to take you through a good example where I can actually show you how an API looks and how it's documented and other things, right? Top APIs today, and this is coming from programmableweb.com. If you haven't been on this page, if you haven't been on this website, I recommend you do, because it really shows you how many APIs, what are the different kinds of APIs. So it's like a repository, and they also kind of allow you to register APIs, right? So it's kind of a marketplace that allows you to to track your APIs and other stuff, right? As you can see, the slide I created back in April. That was when the number of APIs was about a little more than 8,000. And today I updated this picture. We've got around 10,000 APIs that users can consume, right? Now there's a number of 71 mashups. I'm going to be explaining to you what a mashup is. Mashup is nothing but a composition of web APIs to create an application that probably provides enriched functionality. If you look at the chart, look at the way in which the APIs are being consumed. Google Maps API is the most consumed API today, right? Twitter, YouTube, Flickr, Amazon, all of these are really very popular APIs today. And these are open APIs, right? These are, this only means that there have been so many developers who have consumed these APIs and built applications that have created a total of 7,000 odd mashups, right? So that's what this chart talks to you about. and this number keeps growing every day. If you look at programmableweb.com, you'll see how you have increased usage and increased set of APIs that come in. This is one example that I wanted to talk to you about. It's a very creative application, right? Philips came out with wireless lighting. This is a United States example. I don't think we have Philips wireless lighting over here. So what you can do is when you buy lights for your house, they give you they give you the equipment to make your lights available over wireless, right, over Wi-Fi. And what they did was they came out with an app. What you see on the iPhone on that picture is an app that basically allows you to control your lighting over the internet, right? So you could be anywhere, and let's say you want to dim your lights. You want dim lights when you want to enter your room or your house, or you want to switch lights on, all over the house. You can do that by the click of a button on your smartphone, right? So they built the app, and when they did that, they saw a lot of interest from app developers who said that, hey, you know what, you've given the app, but why don't you expose an API, and we can use that API to create even more innovative apps. So they recognized this this lack of APIs, and Philips now has an official developer program that helps developers to use APIs and build applications, right? So very cool or innovative thing, I must say, when it comes to this particular API example. Right? PayPal, we all know this. If you've made payments from PayPal, you'll know that very recently, earlier this year, PayPal launched their APIs. They recently launched a new set of REST APIs, to enable quicker and faster, the payment mechanisms for eBay and what have you. Right? Now, what I want to do now is actually show you a live example of an API. I'm switching to my web browser. Right? I have this page. This is where I wanted to show you. This is programmableweb.com, and if you see, it's a whole directory of APIs. You can actually search. So let's say you do a search on something like travel, and you probably know, you can see popular matching APIs. So there's Expedia who have APIs, right? And if you go to their website, this is their website. The Expedia affiliate network, and what you have here is documentation, right? So clicking documentation. If you see right here, this is how you register for an API key. A developer will need an API key. I'm going to come to this concept very soon. Right? So just let's quickly go here. Documentation. There's documentation on what APIs you have. Let's quickly go to a simple one which says, which gives you the hotel list, right? And look at how easy it is, right? All it does is, these are the different formats in which it's expecting the request to come in. So you do a get on api.ean.com and then say, /list. So there's a version of the API, and there's a resource that you go after, which is called the list of this thing, right? So it gives you very quick information, arrival date, different parameters that you might want to pass. But what's more important is it gives you examples, right? So let's say quickly get onto this example. Let's say REST basic availability. So this is how it is. It's basically showing you that you can have your resource URI like this, and you have all of these options to use in order to get a response, right? So this is just how the request should look, and here's the response. There's a JSON response. I'm going to quickly explain to you what JSON means. So this is how a response is going to look. So what a developer is going to do is he's going to just quickly take this API, take this response, and or rather take this request and then quickly hit it on the web browser, find out what it returns, and get going. You really don't have, what you don't see here is a comprehensive XSD, a JSON schema, or things like that. So this is how it works, right? I want to quickly go take you to another example that I have been using for some time, and that is the EveryTrail. Let me just quickly go there. EveryTrail.com. EveryTrail.com is a vacation enthusiast, social networking website, right? And I have a simple ID that I've created, right? But when I become a member at EveryTrail.com, which allows me to kind of share my my photographs, my trail, and other things, it also gives me a way to actually get onto their API. So this is their developer API. I'm quickly going there. And since I'm logged in, if you see I am already logged in, it's actually showing me my API keys, right? And this is important. This is important when you're actually accessing the functionality that's available on the website for your identification. This is the key and this is the secret, right? They also give you a developer wiki, which allows me to actually use this, right? So if you wanted to create a user, or if you wanted to, let's say, look at users info, right? So let's say users info over here. This is how it's been. This is the URL, right? And this is the parameter that it expects you to have, and this is the kind of response that you're probably going to get based on the user ID, right? Okay, so all you do is do something like this. We go to everytrail.com/user/ what was that again? /API/user. And do that. So it's asking me authentication. So they provided me with a API user, rather API key and secret that they expect. And what I'm doing is actually invoking the API. The stuff that they need is they need my application ID, right? And I know that I've kept this ready. That's my application ID. It basically goes into the HTTP basic authorization header, and this is what I got from them. So if I click on that, I basically come to know there's some invalid user ID. But you basically get a response. I probably mistyped the ID or something like that. But this is how it works when you're actually going to invoke APIs, right? So I just wanted to give you a brief example on how it really works. Apart from that, let's quickly get back to our presentation. What I now wanted to do was to run you through the terminologies, the roles and the relationships. And to begin with, what I wanted to give as a definition, because we're all technical, what is a web API, what is a mashup, what is a web app, what is a mobile app, right? A web API is defined as a set of HTTP request messages along with the definition of the structure of the response messages, right? Now, what's typical about a web API is it's either expressed in JSON or XML, and that's what makes it, a web API. The protocol is HTTP. The payload is either JSON or XML. Those are the key ingredients of an API, of a web API. A mashup, as I told you before, is a web application. It's a web page or an application that uses web APIs to consume or to combine data. It could be presentation and create provide more functionality, right? Web apps, everybody knows what web apps are. It's an application that you access over the internet, and it's typically supported by programming languages like the JavaScript and HTML, and these days HTML5 and things like that, right? Mobile applications are exactly web applications, just like web applications. It's just that the distribution network for mobile applications is either from the popular stores that we have. It could be the Apple App Store if you have an iPhone, the Google Play Store if you have an Android or a Windows Phone store. So these are the terminologies that come into play when you're talking about APIs and web APIs, and that brings us to trying to understand what kind of roles. Let's say your organization has looked at API and has made that a decision to go after, or rather to have a developer program for your organization. Right? So there are different kinds of roles that are there in this particular ecosystem, right? The first one is the business user. Now this person is really looking at this as an opportunity to reach new markets. To understand, he basically understands what value can be brought to the business by exposing assets, by exposing back-end assets, right? He's the one who's basically experimenting with different programs, campaigns. A good way to do this is to have a hackathon, right? I've been to a few conferences where they kind of have, hey, look, this is our API, and this is the information that you can get. Why don't you come over, over lunch, and then why don't you, develop some APIs, or rather develop some applications using our APIs. So that's like a developer hackathon that he would be interested in to popularize that particular API, right? Again, he also has the onus of running this as a business initiative within the organization. So this is one kind of person, the business user, right? The next person that I want to talk to you about is the IT person, is the IT manager, probably the enterprise architect, who has this role of, how am I going to expose the API? This is not going to be old stuff. This is probably going to be new to this person, right? He's probably going to be worried about security. How are you going to scale? We're talking about trillions of devices that potentially are there outside in the world today, and will the backend cope with that much? So scalability of the infrastructure, reliability of the infrastructure, security of the infrastructure is going to be of prime importance for this particular person, right? As it has always been for years together, that this person is always short on time. He has to deliver more in less time, less number of resources, and stuff like that. That brings us to the last person in this space, which is the app developer. Now, this is a person on the street. It could be a person on the street. It could be an app developer in your organization, an internal application developer, right? And probably an enthusiast in creating new apps. Creating be it public apps or private apps. He understands web programming languages. That's what he knows. He probably knows about HTML5, JavaScript, and all of that. And usually spends his free time to create cool new apps. So this is the third person in this particular space. It's important to know these roles because these are the roles that come into play when you're actually looking at putting up or making this monster rise in your organization. I know this probably is old information, but I just wanted to touch upon the basics of REST. As you know, REST is an architectural style as against a protocol. It's a popular choice for building web applications. It has been very popular, and there have been many advances in terms of what REST is, and there's pragmatic REST, there's pure REST. There's many ways in which you can use REST in terms of web applications. Now, what it is, basically, the usage of a verb over a noun, right? So when you look at the verb, it's basically the HTTP methods that you have, the get, put, post and delete. The noun is actually the resource, right? And I'm going to explain this to you with an example, right? Now, let's take an example of an application that gives you to manage your photographs, right? So let's say there's going to be an action, or there's going to be a use case where you say, I want to list all the photographs. And the moment the person logs into the application, he should see all the photographs that he's uploaded in that application, right? So what you're going to do is you're going to get, which is the action, a list of photographs, right? Now in that, you probably also want to do, show me one photograph. I've seen all the pictures in thumbnails. I want to see one picture. So you're probably going to get a specific resource which probably has an ID or maybe a file name or something like that. So there's another use case of REST. You probably want to delete a photograph. You probably want to add a photograph. And when you want to delete, your work changes to delete. When you want to add a photograph, you probably need to provide a photograph that you need to browse over from your file management application, and then provide it. So it needs to be a post action for that particular use case. So this is about understanding REST. Big overview. Of course, there's pages and pages that are available on the internet that explain REST, but I just wanted to give you an overview even without that. XML, as you know, has been a very, very popular information exchange format, right? One interesting thing is that today the number of APIs, we all know that JSON is picking up in popularity, but the number of APIs that are there today are the ones that expose information in XML, right? I have given a very simple example from Twilio that gives the idea of what an SMS message is. Twilio is a telephony API that one can use. So it's about developers basically rely on examples, as I just showed you, on the Expedia affiliate network developer program. They're really not looking at XML schemas. They're looking at examples that they can quickly use and get up and running with it. JSON again is a popular interchange format. It is again based on the JavaScript programming language. It's easy for humans to read and write. I being from old school, I still prefer XML, but for machines it's easier to parse. It's a lot more lightweight than XML. There's less number of tags when you're looking at JSON. All right, so it's the same example that you saw converted in JSON that you see in the bottom half of the screen. All right, now API styles. This is important. It's important to know where your APIs are, right? So let's say there's two types of web APIs that you can create, right? One could be a proxy style web API, where this is your, if you look at this as layers, you have your client layer, you have your API management layer, and then you have your, either on-premise or a cloud resource, right? And let's say you have an order service that uses JSON as a payload, right? And you want to invoke, you want to basically proxy that service, expose that service in an API, right? So that's basically just pass through. It doesn't really make any changes to to the backend service. It just represents that, but all it gives is a friendly URI name. What you can see here is, I've said organization / proxy1_order. That basically goes to the order service, right? So you're building a proxy. You're masking the actual endpoint address because you're basically receiving information directly on the API management layer, right? And it's just a pass-through proxy, right? That is one type of web API. There's other types of web APIs where you probably want to do some, aggregation of information. You probably get one request, and then you make two calls. Let's say you want to you want to basically get all the customers' orders. So you make a request to the customer service, and then you make a request to the order service with the same order number, and basically aggregate that information and give it back to the client application. So just to give you an idea of what it may look like when you're looking at creating APIs, these are the two different styles that one can imagine, right? Proxies and assemblies, or orchestrations, if you want to call it that. Right? A typical SaaS API solution, and when I say SaaS, this is essentially going to be a cloud solution which has multiple tenants, where you can basically host your APIs on the internet, right? So you create either your proxies and your assemblies, and then basically expose your API. So you give a developer portal, right? Just like how you saw in the EveryTrail example, there was a developer portal that one would use, or the Experian network portal, and basically look at the analytics. So there's multiple actors. If you see, the business user is looking at usage metrics of the API. The IT operations person, the IT person, is going to define the APIs, and these are the external developers. It could be people on the street. It could also be someone from a different part of the world that's using the portal, understanding what the APIs mean, and using this as a gateway to go downstream into your organization. And that's what happens. You get your HTTP request into your API management layer. It goes via a security layer. It goes via maybe a typical intranet that may have an enterprise ESB, and then finally back into the enterprise information systems, which will serve the information that has been asked from the applications. Right. So this is the SaaS-based API solution. Coming to an on-premise solution, we have it could be the same thing. All we've done is we moved that application, the solution, right from the cloud, and we've hosted the same on the premise, in the intranet. If you see this, the on-premise APIs live inside the intranet. Everything remains the same. External developers, internal developers still go via the client applications and basically come to reach the APIs, right? So another way in which you can see this, there's players in the market that have both these options, the SaaS-based offering as well as the on-premise offering. Right? API security. I want to quickly touch upon these, right? OAuth, right? This is something which is going to be very, very popular. I'm so sorry. This is going to be a very popular discussion within the API economy and the organization as such. When you look at the different means of securing information, right? One is OAuth, right? This is a protocol, a security protocol that enables users to allow web applications to access other web applications on their users' behalf. Let's say you are on, let's say you're on TechGig.com, right? And TechGig.com gives you an option to import your profile information from LinkedIn, right? But does that mean that you will give your LinkedIn user ID and password to TechGig.com? Probably not, right? You're going to be authorizing TechGig.com to actually access your LinkedIn profile using a token, and I'm going to explain to you about that in a while. So this is very popular. I'm sure you've seen screens that do this thing. We probably may not have known what it is, which is basically OAuth. Basic auth, as I said, is the traditional way of getting things done. It uses the username and password in the request. It's defined as a HTTP specification. Now, mind you, you have to be on some kind of a secure socket layer. to actually exchange information using this particular, because it's in the clear, right? So it mandates that you use the SSL protocol when you're using basic auth. Now, API keys, as I said, API keys are basically nothing but your identity that is provided to you by the API provider, right? I give you an example of the API key and secret that I had from everytrail.com. But again, this is really not based on any standard. It could be the way the provider provides, right? It's a very provider-specific implementation. And when you adopt the API, you also have to adopt the security policies that it mandates, right? Keys they basically act like signatures. The backend service API provider knows that the request has come from an application that you have written and you have used with the API key that was provided to you, right? As I said, OAuth 2.0, it's basically an authorization framework that kind of does the orchestration between two web applications, right? Here, for lack of a better example, if you're on Foursquare and if you want to access information, if you want to post something on your Twitter profile, right? What Twitter gives back to Foursquare is an access token, right? Of course, it's a very elaborate process. Understanding OAuth means that you have to invest some time to understand how exactly the OAuth 2.0 dance happens. But from a layman point of view, it's basically kind of giving someone an approval to go access your resources without having to give your user ID and password. Instead of that, you're given a token which lives for a certain amount of time. Security mechanisms, API keys, as I said, this is basically a code passed by the web applications. It establishes the identity of the calling program. It is used to track, monitor, control, and prevent abuse. So let's say if the API provider knows that you're abusing one particular API, probably giving it a hard time in terms of the number of requests. So you can be kind of blocked from using that API, right? I gave a simple example of how APIs are protected. If you see, EveryTrail API, I showed you the user's API, some trips information, right? And it was basically when you saw the login ID and the password, dialog. That's basically how EveryTrail protected the information that it had. It required the person to be a registered user on Web API, on EveryTrail API, and then use the user ID and password that was, or rather, app ID and secret that was provided to you when you logged in. All right. The who's who. I just wanted to give you a clear idea of who's who in terms of API management. Offering owners. In that, IBM is a leader in API management. Very recently, this was published by Gartner, and if you can see, you've got other players like Layer 7, Software AG, SOA Software, there's Apogee, there's MuleSoft acquired ProgrammableWeb.com, and also some other people in the Magic Quadrant, right? Now, apart from that, what Gartner did was they coined a new term that was that's basically called application services governance. This is the convergence of API management and services management. Right? When you say services management, I'm talking about SOA registries, and this is really brand new, right? So this is where Gartner is making definitions, and organizations are actually looking at application services governance in the offerings that they provide. Right? I had that much to discuss today. I know there may have been questions, but I really hope this has been very useful to you. What I want to do now is quickly take a look at questions. I know we have some amount of time. And what I'm going to do is quickly have a look at the questions. All right. All right. So there's two questions. This comes from Dipen Bhavsar, and there's another one from Yusuf DM. Right. So the first question is, why access tokens are used in some APIs? Is there a reason? Right. And this is a good question. You know, what you're seeing here is the usage of access tokens when you're trying to prevent a backend which is looking for OAuth, which is being secured by OAuth, or it is your API that basically secures that API using OAuth, right? So an access token in the OAuth terms is nothing but a token that you get after you log in and prove with your credentials that you are a valid user. So let's say you're on TechGig.com, and TechGig.com says, you know what, we can get your LinkedIn profile information for you, right? So what it does is TechGig.com goes and asks for your profile information straight away, right? But there's going to be an intermediary, a security application that's going to say, hey, you know what? First, prove me your identity. I don't want to give you Deepan's LinkedIn profile information without knowing that you are actually Deepan, right? So he gives you a login ID and password. You use the login ID and password. The security component at LinkedIn validates you, right? And then what they do is they create a token and they give that token back to the calling application, which is TechGig.com, right? So what you've not given to TechGig.com is your user ID and password. You've basically enabled TechGig.com to use a token that came from a successful login after you logged in into LinkedIn, right? So I hope that gives you an idea. I'm moving on to the next question. How does Web API differ from Web or WCF services? I hope I did answer this question later in the presentation where I gave an example of. Let me just try and see if I can go back to that slide. Yeah, here you go. So it's more to do with reaching out to the external community rather the internal community. It is a lot more relaxed. There's very quick documentation. So I would say ramping up using APIs and ramping up using traditional web services are two different ball games, right? The definition of your web service requires you to carefully craft or draft your WSDL, your operations. You probably have a complex payload. You want to create an XSD for your request and your response and things like that. Whereas when you look at others, which is the web APIs, it's really not going to be that complex. You just want to show examples rather than XSDs, right? And I hope that answers the question. What is the difference between API key and a secret? These are two levels of security. The API provider may be okay to receive just an application ID, right? When you're going after some kind of read-only information. But let's say you want to transact. When you want to transact, let's say you want to read information, you probably just give the API key. But the provider has the liberty to say that if you want to transact, as in if you want to make a payment, you can't just come in with your app ID or app API key. I need your API key and your secret as well. So this is another level of security that an API provider can ask, right? Coming to other questions, are APIs useful for small business owners? Well, this is a long discussion. It really helps to look at what kind of business you are in. But certainly, please do contact me offline and I can give you a much more comprehensive answer. In the interest of time, let's move on to the other one. Do we use SSID in API? I'm assuming that this is, I don't really follow this question. I'll move on to the next. Is there a way to identify the device asking for the API? Yes. Today, applications that are built, the applications that are built do specify information about the kind of device, the environment. In fact, which kind of browser you're using, what version of browser you're using. All of that information is going to be. If it's going to be from an Android phone, it will tell me that it is coming from an Android phone, and that's just how HTML5 and mobile applications are written these days. Is proxy development same as API development? Proxy development can, in a way, proxy development is very similar to what API development is. But what you get with APIs is not only just the proxy, right? You're also looking at how are you going to monetize. There's going to be multiple developers who are going to access, right? How are you going to do developer control? How are you going to do, what are the different kinds of analytics that you want to bring about? That probably a proxy cannot provide. Just a simple proxy will not be able to provide the other non-functional information like, business information. How many yellow sweaters did you sell, right? So a comprehensive API management offering will contain these things like analytics and security, right? What is the difference between services and components? This is a more broader discussion. The previous question was from Gaurav Thakkar. I'm going to look at other few questions, ones that I haven't really answered in the slides. What are business layers and plumbing layers in SOA? This question comes from Dinesh Vass. So business layers and plumbing layers in SOA are, if you look at my slide, where I basically showed you the infrastructure, or rather the architecture. This is where you're talking about. This is where your business is in terms of enterprise information systems, right? And all the plumbing that goes above it, the connectivity details, the security details, all of this I would call as plumbing, right? That you need. Any performance issues? Differences between SOA and REST API? So this question comes from Hemant Chaudhary. Now, performance issues, I would say it really depends on how you scale your backend and how you scale your API management offering. But the way it's been designed, right, for mobile applications and web applications, it's certainly going to be faster than your traditional, web services and older or rather legacy applications, right? Exposing information. So it's going to be much more quicker. You're using JSON. That helps in increasing the performance as well. APIs, are APIs useful for advertising? This question comes from Govind Sharma. Absolutely. If let's say you're a portal and you're basically you're a travel portal and you're offering airline tickets, right? It's going to be very, very easy for you to suggest airlines and suggest sponsored airlines that will give you probably cheaper tickets, and all you would need is that airline to expose that API, and you can quickly render that information, the opportunity information on the web browser. There's another question from Riktam Nandi. A web API can be a SOA, but all SOA is not a web API. Is that yes? A web API can participate in SOA, right? But you must understand that you're really looking at two different kinds of consumers. It's more internal when you're looking at SOA, right? It's internal as well as external when you're looking at web APIs. Okay. There's another question from So there's another question from Balindra Singh. It says, what is the difference between an access token and a refresh access token? So an access token is a token that you get in the initial, right? But an access token has a definite time to live, right? It will expire in some time. right? A refresh token is when you re-log in and you get another token before the token expires. So that's basically a refresh token. It's the same token given to you after you log in again. More questions. Web APIs, is it working only on the presentation layer or is it playing a bit in the business layer? This question comes from Syed Ibrahim. Web API is very essentially in the presentation layer, right? The consuming apps for a web API is basically your mobile phones, your internet TVs, your tablets and web applications, right? And that's nothing but the presentation layer. So very much it works on the presentation layer. Not so much. It really does not hold business information. It's a very stateless layer where all the complexity of the business is actually at the back end, right? Let's see. Let's look at other few questions. API management solution. This question comes from Nilesh Patil. 1. What are the key factors for evaluations? 2. What are the hosting and deployment private cloud? How is it different from typical middleware platform? This is a very good question, and certainly, Nilesh, I would certainly, ask you to actually get offline with me, and I can help you understand, because it really depends on several factors when you're looking at an API management solution, right? Who your consumers are going to be. What kind of business you want to expose with your APIs. In terms of middleware, how can you use your existing middleware, right? Since you're going to be, API management is going to be a layer of technology that basically is going to front end your back-end assets. All that complexity can be reused, right? So certainly this is a good question, but I'm afraid this will have a very, very long answer. Right? How can we use? Is there a tool, any tool to test web services? This question comes from Dinesh Ras. Dinesh, I would suggest you look at a tool called SOAP UI. It's a very, very good tool to look at as a web service tester. It also can simulate performance testing and other things like that. How do we pass API key to the API vendor? Right. So API key, this is a very, very, very important question and a very technical one. Annadurai from Somasundaram has asked this question. API keys are to be given in the invocation URL, right? And again, there is no standard way. IBM's management platform, API management platform, expects a query parameter called app ID, right? But every trail expects something called as API underscore key, right? So it really depends on where you want to, what that query parameter is, and this is going to be specific to the API provider. Now, coming back to how do we pass it? As I said, it has to be passed in the URI, right? The secret probably can come in the payload, but the API app ID or API key should be there in the thing. Okay. What are the methods to access web APIs? HTTP, JSON, and XML. HTTP as a protocol, JSON and XML are the most preferred formats for payload, right? And this question came from Riktam Nandi. All right. Let me see if I have not answered a few questions. Can a novice user make use of APIs to expand business? Govind Sharma asked this question. Yes, a novice user. It's a very simple technology to understand. Believe me. I mean, I picked up on the API management solution offering. If you're aware of REST, if you're aware of JSON and XML, technically you can pick this up very easily. From a business point of view, there is not much of proprietary information or proprietary stuff that you need to look at or you need to be aware of. You can quickly get onto this as soon as possible. But you will need some consulting. You will need people who are experts at this to actually coach and mentor you to do that, right? 10 minutes past the hour. Let me see if there's a good question that I can answer. What's the difference between a public and private API? When a when an API should be made publicly available, right? I know I did answer. This question comes from Swarna Kumar. Swarna Kumar, please go through the slides again. You basically have three kinds of APIs: the public, the private, and the semi-private or semi-public. This is basically really based on where you want to go. If you want your partners to access, it must be a partner, or if it is going to be very confidential, you don't want to expose that information outside, you probably can go in for the API ecosystem that you may have in your organization, which would be internal. Okay. Is it compulsory to create intermediate application to access web API? This question comes from Balindra Singh. Balindra, no, I don't think you need to create an intermediate application. This is going to be as simple as a GET call from any browser, right? So that's the simplicity. You really don't need a layer to make these calls for you. If you have a HTTP client, if you have a browser, you're good to go, actually. All right. So it's all about the beauty of HTTP, REST, and JSON and XML. That kind of comes to, I think I've answered most questions. Right. Okay. So Hemant Kumar Chaudhary asked me a question. Any tools, recommendation patterns for API documentation also? Right. So this is an important question. It's important for an API management solution to have that automatically created developer portal for you. That means that, let's say you invest in an API management offering, and what you do is expose the API. The API management solution should automatically look at the APIs that you've created, and automatically create the documentation for you, right? So most vendors, I'm very sure of IBM, we basically do it very automatically. It's just a button that you press. It's all self-style documentation that creates that portal for you, right? So this is a capability of an API management offering or a solution, right? All right. So there's another question from Siva Kumar Nukala. Will API provider also provide necessary infrastructure to use their endpoints? I think it's yes, in order to a developer to use them. Will API provider also provide necessary infrastructure? Yes, you're right. The question also has the answer. The API management provider has to have that infrastructure to give those endpoints. Another question that came in. Vibhuraja Bhutani asked me a question. What is the best approach, SOAP or REST? I've seen that you mentioned Web API where it interacts with external users. Isn't SOAP better to deal in such a situation, as it will give a better approach and less documentation for external users? Right. So SOAP is there's been schools of thought that say that SOAP can be heavy. SOAP, there's too much to do with SOAP, right? There's there's web service headers, there's WS policy, there's WS security policy, there's WS addressing. All good things that you need in a very comprehensive backend solution are there in SOAP, in this particular protocol, right? But REST is not like that. REST really does not want to spend much time in headers and metadata information that you would want to use. You're probably going to be quicker if you're using REST than using SOAP. Again, the amount of effort that you'll spend in the testing of things like SOAP is a lot more than you would do for RESTful services, right? There's a lot of standard testing that you have to do. A lot of things that you need to take care of in terms of SOAP when you add WSDLs, when you add XSDs, right? So change in SSDs, how are you going to version control XSDs versus versioning the WSDL itself, things like that. So I would say, there's no right answer whether it's REST or SOAP, but if you are going to be, working with web applications and mobile applications, I'm very certain that the best choice there would be to use REST and APIs in some way. All right, Garima, if you can hear me, I know we are 15 minutes past. I really look to you to tell me whether we can go on.
Well, we have taken many questions, so we can close the webinar now.
Right. I know that there's been many questions on the screen.
Yeah, there are more questions that are coming in.
I may not have answered every question.
Exactly.
But I do, I certainly don't mind people, asking me those questions offline. Can I make a closing note quickly?
Yeah,
Garima?
please. Yeah, please.
Thank you. So I certainly value everybody's time for having come over on the session, and I really want to appreciate and thank you all. I really hope this session has been useful to you, and please do connect with me on TechGig if you have any more questions. Apologies to anyone whose questions I have not answered. Please do get in touch with me on TechGig, and I will answer those offline.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Garima.
Thank you so much for the insightful thank you so much for the insightful presentation. It was indeed a great session. I would also like to thank all our participants for their support in making this webinar a success. The recording of the webinar will be available on techgig.com by tomorrow. Thank you all. Thank you, Dinesh, once again. Have a good day.
Garima, what do I need to do? Do I need to stop?
Yeah, you can close
sharing?
the webinar. Yeah, you can close the webinar now.
Okay, so I'm stopping. Do I need to do something now, or can we ensure that the recording is safe?
Yeah, the recording is saved, so
you
can close the webinar.
Exit, right?
Yeah, you can just exit. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Garima, for standing by.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah.